Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of our entire lives. For Marcus Peterson, that moment came on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening at Wilson Manufacturing. After 16 years of keeping the assembly lines running, he was looking forward to clocking out when he heard the crash. Instead of walking away, he rushed to help, finding a critically injured woman in the parking lot. Without hesitation, he stayed with her until the ambulance arrived, missing his evening quota. The next morning, his supervisor handed him termination papers. Company policy, they said, but fate had other plans. As Marcus stood in his front yard that afternoon, wondering how to tell his daughter about losing his job, the air suddenly filled with the thunderous beat of helicopter blades. What he didn't know then was that the stranger he'd helped wasn't just another accident victim. Could this be the moment that transforms a simple act of compassion into an extraordinary adventure? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun hadn't yet touched the frost-covered windows of Marcus Peterson's modest two-bedroom home when his alarm chirped to life. His weathered hands found the familiar shape of the clock in the dark, 5:15 a.m., just like every other workday for the past 16 years. The house creaked with familiar sounds as he made his way to the kitchen, careful not to wake Sarah sleeping down the hall. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet from Sarah's science fair victory last spring, was the photograph he looked at every morning. Margaret's smile still radiated warmth from behind the glass, her arms wrapped around a 12-year-old Sarah at their last family vacation to the coast. 3 years had passed since cancer took her, but some mornings Marcus could still smell her coffee brewing. He pulled his thermal lunch bag from the fridge, leftovers from last night's shepherd's pie, Margaret's recipe, and checked Sarah's schedule pinned beside it. Robotics Club meeting, 4:30 p.m., was written in her precise handwriting. His daughter had inherited her mother's sharp mind and his own fascination with machines. The thought brought a smile to his tired face. The drive to Wilson Manufacturing took exactly 23 minutes in his aging Corolla, the same car he and Margaret had bought when Sarah was born. The facility's familiar silhouette emerged through the morning mist, its smokestacks drawing dark lines against the purple dawn. Marcus badged in at 6:02 a.m., nodding to Jerry at security. "Morning, Pete," Jerry called out, using the nickname that had stuck since his first day. "Line 3's been acting up again. Thompson's crew couldn't sort it last night." Marcus nodded, already mentally reviewing the line's maintenance history. "I'll take a look first thing." The factory floor hummed with the symphony he knew by heart, the rhythmic clank of the assembly line, the whir of hydraulics, the steady pulse of machines that had become extensions of his hands over the years. He'd started as a basic maintenance tech and worked his way up to senior system specialist, though the fancy title didn't change the grease under his fingernails. At his workstation, Marcus found the maintenance logs from the night shift. Thompson's team had tried 3 different fixes for line 3, but the alignment was still off by 2 millimeters, enough to throw the whole production schedule behind. Marcus grabbed his tools and headed over, his steps automatic on the painted safety. Lines he'd helped refresh every year. "Pete, thank God you're here," called Maria from quality control. "We're already 40 units behind." "Morning, Maria. Give me 30 minutes. He could feel the problem before he saw it, a subtle vibration in the conveyor that shouldn't be there. Kneeling beside the line, Marcus placed his hand on the housing and closed his eyes. Experience had taught him that machines spoke their own language, and after 16 years, he was fluent in their dialect of shudders and squeals. It took 28 minutes to diagnose and fix the misaligned bearing that Thompson's team had missed. As the line hummed back to life at full speed, Maria gave him a thumbs up from her station. Marcus made detailed notes in the maintenance log, not because policy required it, but because he believed in doing things right. The morning rolled into afternoon with the steady rhythm of problem-solving. A jammed sensor in packaging, a calibration issue in assembly, a conveyor belt showing early signs of wear in finishing. Each machine had its history, its quirks, its own personality, and Marcus knew them all. During his lunch break, he sat in the break room reviewing Sarah's college brochures. MIT, Caltech, Stanford. Her dreams reached far beyond their modest means. His savings would cover maybe a semester, and Margaret's life insurance had mostly gone to medical bills. But Sarah's grades were exceptional, and her robotics projects had already caught the attention of several scholarship committees. Still pushing for engineering? Asked Tom, dropping into the chair across from him with a coffee. Marcus nodded, carefully tucking the brochures back into their folder. She's got her mother's brains, built a working robot arm from scratch last month. Apple doesn't fall far. And from the tree, Tom grinned. You're the best troubleshooter this place has ever had. She comes by it honest. The afternoon brought a steady stream of minor crises, the usual dance of keeping 19 production lines moving in harmony. Marcus's radio crackled constantly with requests from different departments, each calling for his expertise. He moved between tasks with the efficiency of long practice, his tools like extensions of his hands. At 4:15, he texted Sarah, "Hope Robotics Club goes well. Leftover lasagna in blue container. Love you." Her reply came quickly. "Thanks, Dad. Building. A new servo control today. Don't work too late." The irony of her last comment wasn't lost on him. Overtime had become as routine as his morning coffee, though the extra hours helped with Sarah's college fund. He'd missed more family dinners than he cared to count over the years. But Sarah understood. She was practical like him, responsible, beyond her 15 years. As shift change approached, Marcus completed his final rounds, checking each line one last time. The machines had their own rhythm at this hour, a tired pulse that matched the weary steps of the day shift, heading for the exits. He made notes for the night crew, detailed observations that went beyond the standard checklist. It wasn't required, but it was right. In the locker room, he changed out of his work coveralls, the fabric worn soft from countless washings. His reflection in the scratched mirror showed the same face he'd seen every evening for 16 years. Lines a little deeper, hair a little grayer, but eyes still alert. Margaret used to say those eyes could see through steel, find the heart of any mechanical problem. The autumn evening was settling in as he gathered his things, ready to head home. Through the high windows, he could see the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Just another Tuesday at Wilson Manufacturing, where he'd spent more than half his life keeping the wheels of industry turning. He had no way of knowing that in less than an hour, everything would change. The first drops of rain started falling as Marcus gathered his tools for the final equipment check. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and through the factory windows he could see dark clouds gathering over the city skyline. Most of the day shift had already cleared out, leaving behind the hollow echo of the skeleton crew's footsteps and the ever-present hum of machinery. "Pete, you heading out soon?" Jerry's voice crackled over the radio. "Weather's getting nasty." Marcus keyed his radio. "Just one more line check, Jerry, 10 minutes tops." He'd noticed a slight irregularity in Line 7's output during the afternoon shift. Nothing critical, but the kind of small detail that could become a major problem if left unchecked. As he worked, the rain intensified, drumming against the metal roof with increasing urgency. His phone vibrated, a text from Sarah. "Dad, storm's getting bad. You on your way?" "Almost done," he typed back. "Stay inside, honey. I'll pick up some hot chocolate on the way home." The fix took longer than expected, a misaligned sensor hidden behind 3 layers of safety guards. By the time Marcus finished, the wall clock showed 7:45 p.m. He'd missed his quota again, but the alternative was leaving a problem for the night shift. That wasn't his way. As he walked toward the employee exit, the emergency lights cast long shadows across the empty factory floor. Through the rain-streaked windows, the parking lot was nearly empty. Just his Corolla and a few unfamiliar vehicles remained. The security camera above the door tracked his movement, its red light blinking steadily. The crash came just as he reached for the door handle. It wasn't particularly loud, more of a sickening crunch, followed by the sound of skidding. Tires on wet asphalt. Marcus's reaction was instinctive. He burst through the door into the rain, squinting through the darkness. A sleek black Tesla had spun out on the slick pavement, its front end crumpled against one of the concrete barriers that lined the property. Steam rose from the hood, mixing with the rain in ghostly swirls. The driver's side airbag had deployed, and through the spider-webbed windshield, Marcus could see a figure slumped over the steering wheel. He sprinted across the lot, rain soaking through his jacket. The door was jammed, but the window had shattered. On impact, the interior light revealed a woman in business attire, unconscious, a thin line of blood trailing from her temple. Her phone lay shattered on the passenger seat, its screen flickering weakly. "Jerry," Marcus shouted into his radio. "Call an ambulance. Parking lot, east entrance." The woman stirred slightly, letting out a soft moan. Marcus reached through the window, carefully supporting her neck. "Don't move, ma'am! Help is coming!" Her eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing irises so dark they seemed black in the dim light. "My phone," she whispered. "Need to call." "Stay still," Marcus insisted, his voice firm but gentle. "I've got you." Rain poured down his back as he maintained his awkward position, one arm through the window, supporting the woman's head and neck. He could smell gasoline mixing with the sharp ozone of the storm. In the distance, sirens began to wail. "Pete!" Jerry's voice carried through the rain. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out." The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling what sounded like names or numbers. Marcus kept talking to her, using the same soothing tone he'd used when Sarah had nightmares after Margaret passed. "You're going to be fine," he assured her. "Just stay with me. What's your name?" Her lips moved, but the words were lost in a rumble of thunder. A flash of lightning illuminated the parking lot, reflecting off the Tesla's polished surface and the woman's elegant watch, the kind of timepiece that probably cost more than Marcus made in a year. The ambulance arrived in a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. As the paramedics worked to extract the woman from the wreckage, Marcus stepped back, suddenly aware of how thoroughly soaked he was. One of the paramedics grabbed the broken phone from the passenger seat, tucking it into a clear evidence bag. "Sir?" A young paramedic touched his arm. "Did you witness the accident?" Marcus shook his head. "Heard it from inside. She was unconscious when I got here, but responsive intermittently. Complained about her phone, wanted to make a call. The paramedics efficiently transferred the woman to a stretcher. In the harsh glare of the emergency lights, Marcus could see her more clearly. Asian features, probably in her early 40s, wearing what looked like a tailored suit beneath the foil emergency blanket. "You probably saved her life," the paramedic said, scribbling notes. "Keeping her still like that, with neck injuries, movement can—" "I know," Marcus interrupted softly, remembering similar conversations during Margaret's illness. "Which hospital are you taking her to?" "County General. You'll need to give a statement to the police." Marcus nodded, watching as they loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. The woman's eyes opened once more, finding his face in the chaos. For a moment, their gazes locked, and something passed between them, a connection, a recognition of sorts. Then the ambulance doors closed, and she was gone. The police interview was brief. Marcus described what he'd heard and seen, provided his contact information, and declined their offer to drive him home. By the time he finally got into his Corolla, it was well past 9 p.m. His evening quota would be significantly short, but as he watched the ambulance's taillights disappear into the rain, he couldn't bring himself to care. At a red light, he texted, "Sarah, sorry honey, emergency at work, almost home. Save me some dinner?" Her reply was immediate. "Everything okay? Made grilled cheese? Still warm?" Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. His daughter, always taking care of him, just like her mother would have. The rain had settled into a gentle drizzle by the time he pulled into his driveway. Through the living room window, He could see Sarah curled up on the couch with her robotics textbook waiting up for him despite his late return. As he cut the engine, Marcus had no idea that this rain-soaked Tuesday evening had set in motion events that would transform their lives forever. In his pocket, drops of water slowly seeped into the business card he'd found on the ground near. The accident, a small white rectangle bearing only a name and a simple logo. Catherine Chen, CEO, Global Innovation Corp. The ink was running, making the letters blur like watercolors, washing away the last traces of his old life one drop at a time. Morning arrived with the harsh buzz of Marcus's alarm, his muscles aching from the previous night's events. The sodden clothes he'd hung in the bathroom still dripped occasionally, each drop echoing like a tiny reminder of his choice. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying the woman's face, wondering if she'd survived the night. Sarah was already in the kitchen when he came downstairs, her school uniform neat as always, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked up from her physics, homework, eyes searching his face. "You look terrible, Dad," she said, pushing a cup of coffee toward him. "What happened last night?" Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm mug, telling her about the accident while carefully omitting the more disturbing details. Sarah listened intently, her expression serious beyond her years. "You did the right thing," she said finally, sounding so much like Margaret that his throat tightened. Mom would be proud. The drive to work felt different that morning. Every puddle, every wet patch of asphalt seemed to hold the memory of the previous night. Marcus parked in his usual spot, noting the absence of any evidence of the accident, no broken glass, no skid marks. Only the slightly bent concrete barrier remained as proof it hadn't been a dream. Jerry wasn't at his usual post. Instead, a younger guard Marcus didn't recognize checked his badge with unnecessary scrutiny. The factory floor felt hostile somehow, the familiar hum of machinery carrying an undertone of warning. "Peterson!" The sharp voice of Howard Mills, the floor manager, cut through the morning noise. "My office now!" Marcus's stomach tightened. In 16 years, he'd never been called to Mills's office. He followed the manager's rigid back through the maze of machinery, aware of the eyes following their progress. Mills's office was a glass cube overlooking the production floor, its windows streaked with years of industrial grime. A young woman, in a crisp HR uniform, sat in one of the visitors' chairs, a folder laid precisely on her lap. The nameplate on her desk identified her as Rebecca Torres, Human Resources Coordinator. "Sit down, Peterson." Mills gestured to the remaining chair. Not meeting Marcus's eyes, Rebecca Torres opened her folder with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Peterson, we're here to discuss your performance yesterday evening." Marcus's mind raced. The accident, the missed quota, the overtime he hadn't logged, it all tumbled together in his thoughts. "According to our records," she continued, her voice clinically detached, "you failed to complete your assigned maintenance quota for the evening shift. This marks your third such occurrence this quarter." "There was an accident," Marcus began, but Mills cut him off. "We're aware of the incident in the parking lot. However, company policy clearly states that emergency response is the responsibility of security personnel. By leaving your post without authorization, you created a potential liability issue for Wilson Manufacturing." Marcus stared at them, disbelief rising like bile in his throat. Someone was hurt. She could have died. "The fact remains," Rebecca continued, sliding a document across the desk, "that your actions, while well-intentioned, violated multiple company protocols, combined with your recent performance issues. The document was headed Notice of Termination. Marcus's eyes caught phrases floating in the sea of legal text. Failure to meet performance standards, unauthorized abandonment of post, violation of safety protocols. "This is effective immediately," Mills said, still not meeting Marcus's gaze. "Security will escort you to clear out your locker. 16 years. 16 years of pre-dawn arrivals, of solving problems others couldn't see, of knowing every machine's voice and rhythm. 16 years reduced to a single sheet of paper. My daughter Marcus heard himself say, his voice surprisingly steady. "She's applying to engineering schools. I have medical bills from my wife's. Your severance package will include 2 weeks' pay," Rebecca interrupted smoothly. "And of course we'll provide a reference for future employment opportunities." The young security guard appeared at the door, as if on cue. Marcus stood slowly, his body feeling twice its age. On the production floor below, Line 3 was making that subtle whining sound that meant its bearing was starting to go. No one else would notice for days, he thought. No one else would hear it. At his locker, Marcus methodically packed 16 years into a cardboard box. His tools, each worn to fit his grip perfectly. The spare work shirt Margaret had embroidered with Pete years ago. The family photo taped inside the door, its corners curled with age. Maria from quality control appeared as he was closing the locker for the last time. Her eyes were red. "Pete, we all signed this. It's not much, but..." She thrust a card into his hands, turned, and hurried away. In the parking lot, Marcus sat in his Corolla, the box of belongings on the passenger seat where Margaret used to sit. The card from his co-workers was filled with hastily scrawled messages of support and phone numbers to call if you need anything. His vision blurred as he read them. The termination notice lay on top of his box, its official letterhead stark and unforgiving. Marcus picked it up, reading it again slowly, as if searching for some hidden meaning between the lines of corporate jargon. Each word felt like another brick in the wall between him and the future he'd planned for Sarah. His phone buzzed, a text from his daughter. "Engineering club got moved to tomorrow. Want me to make dinner tonight?" Marcus stared at the message, his throat tight. How would he tell her? How could he explain that doing the right thing had cost them everything they'd worked for? The morning sun caught the edge of the bent concrete barrier where the Tesla had crashed, making it gleam like a silver scar against the grey concrete. Somewhere, the woman he'd helped was hopefully recovering in a hospital bed, unaware that her life had intersected with his in a way that had shattered his world. As Marcus finally started his car, a distant sound made him look up. Something that might have been helicopter blades, or might have been just another machine saying goodbye in its own way. Either way, it marked the end of one chapter of his life, though he didn't yet know it was also the beginning of another. Marcus spent the afternoon in his small backyard, sitting in the faded lawn chair where he used to watch Margaret tend her garden. The termination notice lay crumpled in his pocket, its edges worn soft from the countless times he'd unfolded and reread it, as if repetition might somehow change its contents. He'd practiced different ways to tell Sarah, rehearsing speeches that all seemed inadequate. How do you tell your 15-year-old that her college dreams might have to be deferred? That doing the right thing sometimes came with devastating consequences? The garden Margaret had loved so much was overgrown now, wild roses tangling with persistent weeds. He'd meant to maintain it after she passed, but somehow there was never enough time. Now he had nothing but time, and the thought sent a chill through him despite the warm afternoon sun. The first helicopter appeared as a distant thrum, barely distinguishable from the ambient noise of the suburban afternoon. Marcus didn't pay it much attention. Medical choppers often passed overhead on their way to County General, but the sound grew louder, more insistent, and was joined by another, then another. He stood up as 3 black helicopters emerged from behind the row of maple trees that lined their street. They were sleek, corporate-looking machines, their sides emblazoned with a familiar logo that matched the water-damaged business card in his wallet. Global Innovation Corp. The machines moved with military precision, forming a triangle pattern as they descended toward his modest property. Wind from their rotors sent Margaret's roses thrashing wildly, scattering petals across the yard like pink snowflakes. Papers and leaves swirled in miniature tornadoes, and the windows of his house rattled in their frames. Neighbors emerged from their homes, phones raised to capture the extraordinary scene. Mrs. Henderson from next door stood frozen on her porch, curlers still in her hair, mouth agape. Through the chaos, Marcus noticed Sarah's school bus stopping at the corner. her familiar figure jumping off and running toward the house, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The lead helicopter touched down on their small front lawn with impossible delicacy, its skids barely disturbing the grass. The other two craft maintained their hover pattern, creating a protective circle of whirling blades and thunderous noise. The door of the landed helicopter slid open, and a figure emerged. A woman in a tailored charcoal suit, moving with careful precision that suggested recent injury. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant knot, revealing a small bandage at her temple. Marcus recognized her immediately, though she looked considerably more composed than when he'd last seen her unconscious in the crashed Tesla. Catherine Chen carried herself with the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms, or, in this case, airspace. She walked toward Marcus with measured steps, her slight limp barely noticeable. A man in a dark suit followed 2 paces behind, carrying what looked like a leather briefcase. "Mr. Peterson," she called out over the sound, "of the idling rotors," her voice carrying a hint of warmth that her professional demeanor didn't quite mask. "I believe I owe you a rather significant thank you." Sarah reached them just then, slightly out of breath, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Dad? What's happening?" Catherine's expression softened as she looked at Sarah. "You must be the engineering prodigy I've heard about. Your father mentioned you last night, though he might not remember. He was too busy saving my life." The man with the briefcase stepped forward, offering Catherine what looked like a business card. But this one was different from the water-damaged version in Marcus's wallet. It was made of some sort of metallic material that caught the light like mother of pearl. "Marcus Peterson," Catherine held out the card. "I'm Catherine Chen, CEO of Global Innovation Corp., though I suspect you've figured that out by now." She gestured at the helicopters with a slight smile. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but when I learned this morning what happened to your job, well, let's just say I believe in addressing injustice promptly." Marcus took the card automatically, feeling its unusual weight. The surface seemed to shift colors as it moved, revealing different contact information depending on the angle. "I don't understand," he said, though part of him was beginning to. "You spent 16 years maintaining machines, Mr. Peterson, reading their languages, solving their problems, keeping the wheels of industry turning." Catherine's dark eyes held his. "But more importantly, when faced with a choice between meeting a quota and saving a stranger's life, you chose compassion. That's not just admirable, it's exactly the kind of person I've been looking for." The man with the briefcase stepped forward again, opening it to reveal a tablet and what looked like employment documents. "Miss Chen would like to offer you a position," he said smoothly, "Chief of Global Outreach for the Humanitarian Division of Global Innovation Corp." Sarah gasped beside him. Marcus felt her hand slip into his, squeezing with excitement. "The job comes with full relocation assistance, comprehensive health coverage, and—" Catherine glanced at Sarah with a knowing smile. "A rather generous education package for dependents. Tea is lovely in the fall, I hear?" The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. Marcus looked down at the iridescent business card in his hand, then at his daughter's hopeful face, then at the woman whose life he'd saved standing in his overgrown garden with 3 helicopters creating a windstorm around them. "Why me?" he managed to ask. Catherine's expression grew serious. "Because in 16 years at Wilson Manufacturing, you filed over 3,000 maintenance reports. I had my team, pulled them all last night. Every single one showed not just technical expertise, but genuine care for the machines, for your co-workers, for doing things right. You see problems others miss, you understand complex systems, and most importantly, you have the heart to match your skills." She paused, touching the bandage on her temple lightly. "And because I believe everything happens for a reason, Mr. Peterson. Even rainy Tuesday nights in parking lots." The sound of the helicopters seemed to fade into the background as Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle around him. In Margaret's garden, a single perfect rose petal landed on the metallic business card in his hand, past and future meeting in a moment that felt both impossible and somehow inevitable. So, Catherine. Chen held out her hand. Shall we discuss your future? The Global Innovation Corp headquarters rose from the morning mist like something from a science fiction novel, its glass and steel frame reflecting the sunrise in sheets of rose gold. Marcus stood in the vast lobby, Sarah beside him, both still, adjusting to the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. His new employee badge, a sophisticated piece of technology that seemed to pulse with a subtle blue light, felt foreign against his chest where his old Wilson manufacturing ID had rested for so many years. "Ready, Mr. Peterson?" Catherine Chen's assistant, David, appeared silently beside them. Like everything else about global innovation, he seemed to operate on a different level of efficiency than the world Marcus had known. "Ms. Chen is waiting in the Innovation Hub." The elevator ride was smooth and silent, climbing 50 floors without so much as a whisper. Sarah pressed her face against the glass wall, watching the city shrink beneath them. "Dad," she whispered. "Pinch me." The Innovation Hub occupied the entire 51st floor, a space that defied Marcus's understanding of what an office could be. Workstations that looked more like artwork than computers were scattered throughout the open floor plan. Holograms flickered in various corners, displaying projects in progress. Teams of people from every corner of the world collaborated in glass-walled meeting rooms, their conversations held in a dozen different languages. Catherine Chen stood at a circular console in the center of it all, her suit as impeccable as the day before, though she'd removed the bandage from her temple. The injury was barely visible now, a small reminder of the accident that had changed everything. "Welcome to your new home," she smiled, gesturing to the space around them. "I hope it's not too overwhelming." "It's incredible," Sarah breathed, her eyes fixed on a holographic display showing what appeared to be a new type of water purification system. "I thought we'd start with a tour," Catherine said, "but first, there's something I'd like to show you both." She touched the console, and the air above it filled with a three-dimensional map of the world. Points of light flickered across its surface, each representing a global innovation project. "Our humanitarian division," Catherine explained, "operates in 43 countries. We build schools in regions where education is a luxury. We develop sustainable energy solutions for communities off the grid. We create medical facilities in areas where healthcare is scarce." She paused, looking at Marcus intently. "But we need someone who understands both the technical and human aspects of these projects, someone who can see the small problems before they become big ones." The map zoomed in on a remote village in Southeast Asia, where a holographic school shimmered into existence. "This is our latest project," Catherine continued, "a self-sustaining educational facility powered by solar technology. But we're having issues with the power distribution system." Marcus found himself stepping closer to the hologram, his trained eye already catching potential issues in the design. "The voltage regulators," he murmured. "They're not accounting for the temperature fluctuations during monsoon season." Catherine's smile widened. "Exactly the kind of insight we need. You see the problems hidden in the details, just like you did with those machines at Wilson." She waved her hand, and the hologram shifted to show other projects. Water purification plants in Africa, wind farms in South America, medical clinics in remote mountain regions. "Your role," she explained, "will be to oversee these projects from conception to completion. You'll work with local communities, coordinate with our engineering teams, and ensure that everything we build serves its purpose long after we've left." Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Will we get to visit these places?" Catherine nodded. "Both of you, if you'd like. We believe in family here at Global Innovation. And speaking of which," she pressed another button on. The console and a new hologram appeared. A detailed file about Sarah, including her academic records, robotics achievements, and college aspirations. We have a robust internship program for exceptional students, Catherine said, watching Sarah's eyes widen. And our educational support extends through graduate school, should you choose that path. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Just yesterday he'd been wondering how to tell Sarah they might need to defer her college dreams. Now, there's one more thing, Catherine said, leading them to a nearby door. It opened into a private office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A nameplate on the desk read, Marcus Peterson, Chief of Global Outreach. Your new workspace. Catherine gestured. Though you won't be spending too much time here, most of our work happens in the field. Marcus ran his hand along the desk's smooth surface, trying to process the magnitude of change in his life. His old toolbox, cleaned and restored, sat in one corner, a bridge between his past and future. Why go to all this trouble? He asked finally, voicing the question that had been nagging at him. Surely there are more qualified people. Catherine's expression grew serious. When I was trapped in that car, drifting in and out of consciousness, I heard you talking to me. You didn't know who I was, what I could offer, whether I would live or die. But you stayed, supporting my neck, keeping me still, talking to me, about hope and survival. She touched her temple gently. The doctors said that if you hadn't kept me from moving, the injury could have been catastrophic. She moved to the window, gazing out at the city below. In that moment, you showed something that can't be taught or bought, genuine compassion combined with practical knowledge. That's what our humanitarian division needs. That's what these projects need. Sarah had wandered over to a wall display showing current project timelines. Dad, she called out, excitement in her voice. They're building a robotics training center. In Thailand? Catherine smiled. We believe in nurturing the next generation of problem solvers. Perhaps you'd like to be involved in that project. Marcus watched his daughter's face light up with possibilities, saw the future opening up before them like a book waiting to be written. His new badge pulsed softly against his chest, its rhythm somehow matching the beating of his heart. When do we start? He asked. Catherine's answer was interrupted by a gentle chime from the console. Actually, she said, checking the display, we have a situation developing at our Mongolia site. The solar array is showing some unusual readings. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of challenge and confidence. Care to help me diagnose your first problem? As Marcus stepped toward the console, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window, not just a maintenance technician anymore, but someone about to help change lives across the globe. Somewhere, he thought, Margaret was smiling. The helicopter simulator hummed to life around Marcus, its cockpit a perfect replica of the machines he'd seen land in his yard just 2 weeks ago. Through the virtual windscreen, a digital sunrise painted the mountains of New Zealand in shades of amber and gold. His first training mission. Remember, Catherine's voice came through his headset, the machine speaks to you, just like those assembly lines did. Listen to what it's telling you. Marcus wrapped his hands around the controls, feeling the subtle vibrations. It wasn't so different from diagnosing a failing bearing or a misaligned drive shaft. Everything had its own rhythm, its own language of movement and resistance. Taking her up, he said, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. The simulator responded to his touch, lifting smoothly into the virtual dawn. Below, the landscape unfolded like a living map, each peak and valley a potential landing zone, each cluster of buildings a community that might need their help. His first week at Global Innovation had been a blur of training sessions and briefings, emergency protocols, international regulations, cultural sensitivity workshops, all delivered with the same precision and attention to detail that seemed to characterize everything Catherine Chen touched. But this, learning to fly, was different. This was freedom, perfect stability, his flight instructor noted, watching the instruments. You've got a natural feel for it, Marcus. In the observation room, Sarah sat with her homework spread across a desk, occasionally glancing up to watch her father's progress. She'd taken to spending her afternoons at Global Innovation, working on her robotics projects, surrounded by some of the finest engineers in the world. More than once, Marcus had found her deep in conversation with Catherine, discussing innovations that made his head spin. The simulator scene changed, presenting him with a challenging landing scenario: high winds, rough terrain, limited visibility. The kind of conditions they often faced in remote areas where help was needed most. "Trust your instincts," Catherine encouraged. "Feel the balance point." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, letting his hands read the helicopter's responses like Braille. There was a sweet spot, a perfect harmony between power and control, just like there had been with every machine he'd ever mastered. The landing was textbook perfect. "Well done," Catherine said, entering the simulator as the program powered down. "I think you're ready for the real thing." Minutes later, they stood on the rooftop helipad of Global Innovation Headquarters, the morning sun warm on their faces. A sleek, black helicopter waited, its rotors gleaming, the company logo catching the light like a promise. "This one's yours," Catherine said, touching the aircraft's smooth skin. "Each of our field directors has their own transport. You'll need it for the work ahead." Marcus circled the machine slowly, running his hand along its surface, reading its character through. His fingertips. "She's beautiful," he murmured. "She's also equipped with every safety feature we could imagine," Catherine added, "and some we had to invent. The autopilot system alone took 3 years to perfect." They lifted off into the clear morning sky, the city shrinking beneath them as Marcus guided the helicopter with growing confidence. Catherine sat beside him in the co-pilot seat, occasionally offering quiet guidance, but mostly letting him find his own rhythm with the controls. "How does it compare to the simulator?" she asked as they banked smoothly over the coastline. Marcus smiled, feeling the subtle differences between virtual and reality. "It's like comparing a photograph to a sunset. The basics are the same, but this is alive," Catherine finished. "This is real." They flew for an hour, practicing approaches and landings at various locations. Each touchdown was smoother than the last, each maneuver more natural. By the time they returned to the helipad, Marcus felt like he'd been flying all his life. Sarah was waiting for them, bouncing with excitement. "Dad, that was amazing. I watched the whole thing on the tracking system. When can I learn?" Catherine laughed. "Let's get your father fully certified first. But speaking of learning," she pulled out her tablet, showing Sarah a complex schematic. "What do you make of this?" "It's for the robotics center in Thailand." As Sarah dove into the technical details, Marcus stood back, watching his daughter and his new mentor discuss servo motors and artificial intelligence. 2 weeks ago, he'd been worried about making rent. Now he was learning to fly helicopters and watching Sarah's dreams take flight alongside his own. That evening, as they prepared to head home, Catherine handed Marcus a small leather folder. Inside was his pilot's license, provisional but real. Another step away from the life he'd known, another door opening to the future. "Tomorrow," Catherine said, "we'll start your field training. There's a small village in Nepal that needs a solar power installation. Think you're ready to make a difference?" Marcus looked at the license in his hands, then at his daughter's glowing face, and finally at the woman who had transformed their lives with a mix of helicopter dramatics and quiet wisdom. "I was born ready," he said, and for the first time since Margaret's passing, he felt truly, completely alive. Later that night, as Marcus sat in his study reviewing flight manuals, he found a note Sarah had slipped into his briefcase. In her precise handwriting, it read, "Mom would be so proud of you, Dad. You're not just fixing machines anymore, you're fixing the world." He touched the pilot's license in his pocket, feeling its weight like a key to a new universe of possibilities. Tomorrow, they would begin their real work. Not just maintaining machines, but maintaining hope in places where it was needed most. The thought made him smile and somewhere in the quiet house he could have sworn he heard Margaret's gentle laughter, carried on the wings of dreams, taking flight. The village of Namche Kumbu clung to the Himalayan mountainside like a jewel set in stone, its terraced fields and prayer flags creating a tapestry of human perseverance against nature's grandeur. Marcus studied the project blueprint on his tablet as their helicopter approached, noting the challenges they'd face installing a solar array at this altitude. "Remember," Catherine's voice came through his headset, "the technical specs are only half the equation. These people have lived here for generations. We're guests in their home." The landing zone was tight, a narrow plateau that had been cleared specifically for their arrival. Marcus executed the touchdown with precise control, the skills from his intensive training flowing naturally now. Prayer flags fluttered in the rotor wash as village elders approached, their weathered faces bearing welcoming smiles. The local liaison, Pemba Sherpa, stepped forward to greet them. "Welcome to Namche Kumbu," he said, bowing slightly. "The village has been preparing for your arrival." Catherine had chosen this as Marcus's first project with careful consideration. The village needed reliable power for their medical clinic and school, but the installation would test both his technical skills and his ability to work with local communities. The blueprint they'd brought was elegant in its simplicity. A solar array designed to withstand extreme weather conditions, coupled with a sophisticated battery storage system. But as Marcus surveyed the actual site, he immediately spotted challenges that hadn't been apparent in the planning stages. "The angle of the mountain face," he murmured, running his hand along the rough stone. "It's going to affect our maximum collection efficiency." His mind was already calculating adjustments, just as he used to modify machinery specifications at Wilson Manufacturing to match real-world conditions. Pemba watched him with knowing eyes. "The mountain. She does not easily share her space," he said. "But perhaps you can convince her." Over the next few hours, Marcus walked the site with the village council, listening more than talking. He learned about the winter storms that could dump meters of snow in a single night, about the spring winds that howled through the valleys, about the youngsters who had to study by candlelight because the generator fuel was too precious to waste. That evening, sitting cross-legged in the community hall, sharing butter tea and traditional flatbread, Marcus pulled out his tablet and began modifying the original plans. His fingers flew over the screen, incorporating everything he'd learned from the villagers into the design. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked, watching him work. "We need to adapt the mounting system," Marcus explained, showing her his modifications. "See how I've adjusted the angle? It'll shed snow automatically, and these reinforced struts will better handle the wind loads. Plus, I've redesigned the maintenance access points based on local construction techniques. They'll be able to service it themselves, using tools they're already familiar with." Catherine studied the new design, a smile playing at her corners of her mouth. "This is exactly why I chose you, Marcus. You don't just see problems, you see solutions that work for the people who'll be living with them." The next few days were a blur of activity. Marcus worked alongside the villagers, teaching as much as he built. He showed them how the system worked, not just the what, but the why of each component. Young people from the village shadowed him, asking questions that reminded him of Sarah's curiosity. When they encountered an unexpected problem with the power inverters, Marcus found himself drawing on his years of maintenance experience. He gathered the team, spread out the components on a woven mat, and walked them through the troubleshooting process step by step, just as he used to do with new technicians at the factory. On the fourth day, as the sun set behind the mountains, Marcus stood with Pemba and Catherine, watching the clinic's lights come on for the first time under their new power system. The soft glow spilling from the windows seemed to make the prayer flags dance with extra vigor. "You have done more than bring us power," Pemba said, clasping Marcus's hand. "You have brought us knowledge, respect, and independence. These are gifts beyond price. Later that night, as they prepared for their departure, Marcus found a small package wrapped in colorful cloth on his seat in the helicopter. Inside was a traditional prayer flag, but with a unique addition. Sewn into its fabric was a technical diagram of the solar array, rendered in traditional Buddhist artistic style. A reminder, Pemba explained, that old ways and new ways can work together, just as you have shown us. As they lifted off the next morning, Marcus watched the prayer flags flutter below, their colors bright against the snow. He thought about the machines he used to maintain, how each had its own voice, its own story. Now he was learning to hear different voices, different stories, and helping write new chapters in lives across the globe. "Ready for the next one?" Catherine asked as they banked toward home. Marcus touched the prayer flag in his pocket, feeling its gentle weight like a bridge between worlds. "More than ready," he replied, and meant it with all his heart. The weather report on Marcus's tablet painted a grim picture of what they were flying into. A massive storm system was bearing down on the Philippine coast, threatening to destroy months of work on their latest sustainable housing project. Red. Warning indicators flashed across the screen as updated wind speeds and rainfall predictions rolled in. "We should be able to beat the worst of it," Marcus said into his headset, adjusting their flight path slightly. In the 3 months since his first mission, he'd grown comfortable with the helicopter's controls, learning to read weather patterns as fluently as he once read machine diagnostics. Catherine sat beside him in the co-pilot's seat, studying her own data feed. "The foundation stabilization systems haven't fully cured yet. If those houses shift now—" She didn't need to finish the thought. They'd spent weeks implementing an innovative foundation design that would help the coastal communities' homes withstand future storms. Now Mother Nature seemed determined to test their work ahead of schedule. The site came into view through breaks in the clouds. 50 houses in various stages of completion, their distinctive green roofs designed to harvest rainwater. Local construction. Crews were already rushing to secure loose materials, their yellow safety vests bright dots of color against the darkening sky. Marcus landed on the temporary helipad, the wind buffeting their craft with increasing force. Ramon, their site foreman, ran to meet them, holding his hard hat against the gusts. "The concrete hasn't set properly in sectors 3 and 4, he shouted over the wind. "The humidity's been playing havoc with the curing process." This was the kind of problem Marcus had been hired to solve, where technical knowledge met real-world complications. He pulled up the foundation specifications on his tablet, mind already racing through possible solutions. "Show me," he said, to Ramon, and they set off through the construction site, Catherine close behind. The houses were beautiful in their simplicity, designed to be both storm-resistant and easily repairable using local materials. But now, watching moisture bead on the partially cured foundations, Marcus could see they had a serious problem. "The chemical catalyst in the concrete mix," he muttered, kneeling to examine the surface. "It's not activating properly in this humidity." His years of dealing with temperamental machinery had taught him that sometimes the smallest factors could cascade into major failures. Catherine watched him work, recognizing the focused expression he got when solving complex problems. "What are you thinking?" "We need to change the equation," Marcus said, standing up. "Ramon, do you still have those industrial dehumidifiers we used for the initial site survey?" Ramon nodded. 4 of them, in storage. "Get them out here. We'll create controlled curing environments using temporary shelters. The storm might actually help us. The pressure change will accelerate the reaction once we control the humidity." They worked through the afternoon, racing against the approaching storm. Marcus modified the chemical ratios in the remaining concrete mix, adjusting for the atmospheric conditions. Local workers, who had initially been skeptical of the foreign technical expert, now followed his instructions with trust, born of seeing him work alongside them day after day. The storm hit just before sunset, its force even greater than predicted. Marcus stood with Catherine in the site office, watching through the windows as rain hammered against their protective measures. his tablet continuously updated with data from sensors embedded throughout the site, monitoring stress loads and stability factors. "Look at this," he said, pointing to one of the readings. "The modified foundations are actually performing better than the original specs. The pressure distribution is almost perfect." Catherine smiled. "You know what I see? I see someone who's stopped thinking like a maintenance man and started thinking like an innovator." A massive thunderclap shook the building, making the lights flicker. In that moment of darkness, Marcus remembered similar storms at Wilson Manufacturing, how he used to worry about power surges affecting the assembly lines. Now he was protecting not just machines, but homes, people's lives and futures. Through the night, they monitored the site's systems, making adjustments as needed. Marcus worked with Ramon to reinforce critical areas, their movements synchronized by months of collaboration. The storm raged until dawn, testing every innovation, every adaptation they'd made. When the sun finally broke through, they emerged to survey the damage. The unfinished sectors showed some signs of stress, but the modified foundations had held. Their quick thinking and adaptations had saved months of work and millions in resources. "You know what this means?" Catherine said, watching local families return to the site, relief evident on their faces. "Every storm that doesn't destroy these homes is a victory. Every challenge we overcome makes the next project better." Marcus nodded, thinking of the weather report that had started it all. In his pocket, he still carried the prayer flag from Nepal, a reminder that every problem had a solution if you were willing to learn, adapt, and respect both the old ways and the new. "We should document these modifications," he said, already making notes on his tablet. "Update the standard procedures for high humidity environments." Catherine watched him work, seeing not just the technical expert she'd hired, but a man who had found his true calling. "You're not just fixing problems anymore, Marcus. You're preventing them." That's what leadership looks like. As if in response, his tablet chimed with a new alert. Another potential storm system forming in the Pacific, but this time they would be ready. This time they knew exactly what to do. The newspaper landed on Marcus's desk with a soft thud, its headline stark against the morning light. "Global Innovation Corp accused of exploiting local communities." Catherine stood by the window of his office, her usual composure showing slight. "Cracks of concern. Nexus Development," she said, naming their largest competitor. "They're claiming our sustainable housing project in the Philippines is displacing local businesses, that we're using humanitarian aid as a cover for corporate expansion." Marcus picked up the paper, scanning the article. The accusations were cleverly crafted half-truths, taking their success and twisting it into something sinister. His eyes caught on a quote from a local source, claiming they were forcing traditional builders out of work. "This is nonsense," he said, thinking of Ramon and his crew, of the skills training programs they'd implemented, of the local businesses they'd partnered with. "We've documented everything, every contract, every partnership. It's not about truth," Catherine interrupted softly. "It's about perception. Nexus wants the Malaysian government contract, and they're using this to undermine our credibility. The Malaysian project was massive, a series of self-sustaining communities that would transform the region's infrastructure. Global Innovation had spent months preparing their proposal, with Marcus's innovative designs for local resource integration at its heart. His tablet chimed with incoming messages, partners seeking reassurance, team members sharing links to more negative press. The story was spreading, gaining momentum in the echo chamber of social media. "We need to respond," Marcus said, already pulling up their project documentation. "Show them the reality." Catherine nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "The board is meeting this afternoon. They're concerned about the impact on our reputation." Marcus thought of Sarah, who had proudly presented their Philippine project at her school's International Relations Forum just last week. He thought of the families moving into homes designed to withstand nature's worst, of children studying under reliable power for the first time. "Then let's give them something to be proud of instead," he said, standing up. "Call Ramon. Get me a live feed from the site. It's time these accusations met reality." The board meeting was tense, faces on the video wall showing varying degrees of concern. Marcus stood beside Catherine, his tablet connected to the main display, Ramon's team ready on standby. "Members of the board," he began, his voice steady, "I'd like to show you what exploitation really looks like." The screen split to show live feeds from their Philippine site. Ramon's face appeared, along with dozens of local workers and business owners. One by one they spoke about the skills they'd learned, the businesses they'd started, the opportunities they'd created. "Our concrete mixing plant," Ramon said, turning his camera to show a modern facility, "was a partnership with 3 local construction companies. We've secured contracts beyond Global Innovations projects. We're competing for regional development work now." Marcus advanced through his presentation, showing employment statistics, local business growth, and sustainability metrics. "We don't displace communities," he said firmly. "We help them build their own future." The board members' expressions began to shift from concern to understanding. When Marcus finished, there was a moment of silence before the chairwoman spoke. "Mr. Peterson," she said, "how quickly can you replicate these results in Malaysia?" Catherine's smile was barely visible, but Marcus caught it. "We've already begun coordination with local businesses there," he replied. "Our proposal includes partnership structures based on our success in the Philippines." Later that evening, as they watched Ramon's team sending out their own press release, written entirely by the local business coalition, Catherine handed Marcus a folder. "What's this?" he asked, opening it to find a formal letter. "Nexus Development's internal memo," she said. "One of their own executive board members sent it to us. Apparently not everyone agrees with their tactics. They're withdrawing their bid for Malaysia." Marcus studied the letter, thinking about how far they'd come from that rainy night in the parking lot. "You know what this means," he said. "We're not just building houses anymore. We're building trust." Catherine nodded, looking out at the city lights below. "That's always been the real foundation of what we do." Speaking of which, she handed him another document. "The Malaysian government moved up their timeline. They want us to start next month." Marcus smiled, already thinking of the possibilities, the lives they could change. His tablet chimed again, but this time it was Sarah, sending a simple message that meant everything. "Saw the news, Dad. You showed them what really matters." The newspaper still lay on his desk, its accusations now seeming small against the reality of their work. Marcus picked it up, not to dwell on its claims, but to remind himself that every challenge was an opportunity to prove the power of compassion and competence working hand in hand. The old journal lay open on Catherine's desk, its leather cover worn smooth by years of handling. Marcus had never seen it before, though he'd been in her office countless times over the past 6 months. Today was different. Today, Catherine Chen was finally sharing her story. "I found this while cleaning out my apartment," she said, touching the journal's pages with unusual gentleness. "I started writing it 20 years ago, when I was living in a shelter in San Francisco." Marcus sat quietly, sensing the weight of the moment. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glowed in the evening light, but Catherine's eyes were focused on the past. "My parents lost everything in the Asian financial crisis," she continued. "We immigrated with 2 suitcases and dreams of the American dream. Instead, we found ourselves in a homeless shelter. My father working 3 jobs, my mother cleaning houses." She turned a page, revealing neat columns of calculations and sketches. "I used to sit in the shelter's common room designing things better. Heating systems, more efficient food distribution methods, ways to give people privacy in crowded spaces. The shelter manager caught me one day. Instead of telling me to stop wasting paper, she bought me more notebooks." Marcus thought of Sarah, of her endless drawings and calculations, of the dreams that had seemed impossible just months ago. "You were already an engineer," he said softly. Catherine smiled. "I was a scared teenager who thought she could fix the world with math and determination." She paused, running her finger along a diagram. "Sound familiar?" The parallel with Sarah wasn't subtle. Marcus had seen the growing mentorship between them, had watched his daughter flourish under Catherine's guidance. Now he understood why. "What happened next?" he asked. "Mrs. Rodriguez, the shelter manager, she helped me apply for scholarships, got me into a STEM program for underprivileged students." Catherine's voice carried a warmth reserved for precious memories. "When I founded Global Innovation, she was my first call. Asked her to help me design programs that would actually work for people in crisis." She turned to another page, showing a young Catherine with an elderly woman, both smiling at the camera. "Mrs. Rodriguez passed away last year, but every project we do, every life we change, it's built on the foundation she helped me create." Marcus thought of his own journey, of the twist of fate that had brought him from a factory floor to flying helicopters into remote villages. "Is that why you stopped that night? In the rain?" Catherine closed the journal carefully. "I was tired. Working late again, thinking about quarterly reports instead of watching the road." She touched her temple, where the scar had faded to almost nothing. "When I woke up in that car, trapped, in pain, I heard your voice. You kept talking about hope, about holding on, just like Mrs. Rodriguez used to talk to me during my darkest nights in the shelter." She stood, walking to the window. "When I learned you'd been fired for helping me, I had to. No more. I read every maintenance report you'd ever filed. Saw how you always included notes about teaching others, about making things better, not just fixing what was broken." Marcus joined her at the window. Below, the city was coming alive with evening energy. Millions of stories playing out in pools, of light and shadow. "I saw myself in Sarah the moment I met her," Catherine admitted. "That same fire, that need to understand how things work, how to make them better. But I saw Mrs. Rodriguez in you, Marcus. Someone who helps without asking what they'll get in return." She picked up the journal again, its pages containing the blueprint of her journey from shelter to success. "I've never shown this to anyone else, but I think it's time Sarah saw it. Time she understood that success isn't about where you start. It's about who helps you along the way." Marcus thought of Margaret, of how she would have loved to see their daughter soaring toward her dreams. "She'd like that," he said. "Sarah's been asking questions about you, you know, about your path." Catherine smiled, a plan already forming. In her eyes, then perhaps it's time for a proper mentorship program at Global Innovation, starting with one very promising young engineer. As if on cue, Marcus's phone lit up with a text from Sarah. "Dad, just finished the preliminary designs for the water filtration system. Catherine's going to love this." The journal sat between them on the desk, a bridge between past and future, between struggles and success. In its pages, Marcus could see the echoes of his own story, of Sarah's journey, of all the lives they were working to change. "You know," Catherine said, "sometimes I think that accident was fate's way of bringing the right people together at the right time." Marcus nodded, thinking of rain-soaked nights and healing scars, of prayers flags in Nepal and storms in the Philippines, of all the paths that had led them here. "Maybe it's time to write a new chapter," he said. Catherine's smile held both understanding and promise. "I think we already are." The emergency protocol document flashed red on every screen in Global Innovation's command center. Marcus studied the satellite imagery with growing concern. The earthquake that had just hit rural Indonesia had taken everyone by surprise, including the geological monitoring stations. "Status report," Catherine called out, striding into the room. She'd been in Tokyo when the alert came in, but had immediately rerouted her flight. 7.2 magnitude, epicenter 15 kilometers from our Sulawesi educational complex," Marcus responded, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "The buildings held. Our reinforced foundations worked exactly as designed. But There's a situation developing at the dam above the village. The main screen showed thermal imaging of the hydroelectric dam they'd helped modernize 6 months ago. Hairline cracks were spreading through the concrete like frost on a window, and the reservoir levels were dangerously high from recent rains. "How many people?" Catherine asked, already knowing where this was heading. 800 in the immediate flood path. Our school has another 300 students and staff. Marcus pulled up the emergency evacuation plans they'd developed. Plans he'd hoped they'd never need. "We've got 90 minutes before those cracks become critical." Catherine nodded once, trusting his assessment. In the months since the Philippines project, Marcus had proven himself, not just as an engineer, but as a crisis manager. "What do you need?" "Everything," he said simply, already reaching for his flight helmet. And Sarah's help, his daughter, looked up from her workstation, where she'd been monitoring the structural integrity sensors they'd installed throughout the region. At 15, she was already one of their best analysts for real-time data interpretation. "The drone network," Sarah said, understanding immediately. "We can use them to map the evacuation routes and identify structural threats." Marcus allowed himself a moment of pride despite the crisis. "Upload the control protocols to my tablet. I'm flying out with the first response team." The next hour was a blur of precise chaos. Marcus piloted the lead helicopter while coordinating with local authorities and his engineering team. Sarah's voice in his headset provided constant updates as her drone network built a real-time map of the deteriorating situation. "New crack forming on the western support," she reported. "Rate of spread indicates total failure in 63 minutes. Marcus could see the dam now, its massive face showing the spiderweb patterns of stress. Below, evacuation buses were already moving people to higher ground, following the route Sarah's drones had identified as safest. "We need more time," he muttered, his mind racing through options. 16 years of keeping assembly lines running had taught him that sometimes the riskiest choice was taking no risk at all. "Catherine," he called over the secure channel, "I'm going to try something. It's either brilliant or insane." "Those are often the same thing," she replied. "What do you need?" "Authorization to implement Protocol 7. There was a pause. Protocol 7 was their emergency measure of last resort, intentionally breaching the dam in a controlled manner to prevent catastrophic failure. It had never been attempted outside simulations. "Dad," Sarah's voice cut in, "the structural analysis supports it. If we can direct the release through the auxiliary spillway." "Do it," Catherine commanded. "I trust both of you." Marcus set the helicopter down on the dam's maintenance platform, the concrete trembling beneath his feet as he ran to the control room. Inside, he found exactly what he'd expected: panels of warning lights and a system waiting for someone with the courage to make an impossible choice. "Sarah, I need those drone feeds," he called out, pulling up the emergency protocols on his tablet. "Show me the stress patterns." His daughter's voice was steady as she talked him through the data, helping him identify the precise points where controlled demolition charges would do the most good. Together, they calculated explosion forces, water pressure, and debris patterns. A father-daughter dance of engineering expertise with hundreds of lives in the balance. "Charges set," Marcus reported, his hands flying over the control panel. "Evacuation zone is clear. Sarah, drones confirm optimal conditions," she replied. "Dad, be careful." Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of another rainy night when a split-second choice had changed everything. "Sometimes," he said softly, "you have to break something to save it." He pressed the detonation sequence. The controlled explosions were perfect, channeling the reservoir's fury through the reinforced spillway. Marcus watched from the helicopter as millions of gallons of water rushed through the artificial channel they'd created, missing the populated areas entirely. Hours later, as emergency teams secured the area and families began returning to their homes, Catherine found Marcus sitting in the school's courtyard, Sarah asleep against his shoulder. "You know what I saw today?" Catherine asked, handing him a tablet showing news coverage of the event. "I saw a maintenance technician who became An engineer who became a hero. But more importantly, I saw a father and daughter who saved hundreds of lives because they never stopped believing in better solutions. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, then at the tablet showing the successful implementation of Protocol 7. "We didn't just save lives today," he said quietly. "We proved that sometimes the craziest solutions are the right ones. Sarah proved it." Catherine smiled. "Speaking of proof, the board wants to implement your emergency response protocols across all our projects globally. They're calling it the Peterson Protocol now." Marcus shook his head, thinking of how far they'd come from factory quotas and termination notices. "No," he said, "call it the Next Generation Protocol, because that's what it really is. A bridge between experience and innovation, between what we know and what we dare to try." In his pocket, his tablet chimed with another aftershock warning, but this time they were ready. This time they knew exactly what they could achieve together. The viral video had already reached 50 million views by the time Marcus saw it. Captured by one of Sarah's drones, the footage showed him running across the dam's maintenance platform, the concrete cracking beneath his feet as he implemented Protocol 7. The public had dubbed it the Dam Whisperer, and now the world wanted to know more about the former factory worker who'd saved an entire village. "CNN wants an interview," Catherine said, scrolling through her tablet in Marcus's office. "So does BBC, Al Jazeera, and every major network in Asia. The Peterson Protocol is trending globally." Marcus looked up from his own screen, where he'd been reviewing structural improvement plans for similar dams worldwide. "We need to correct in that name," he said. "It's the Next Generation Protocol. Sarah's contribution needs to be recognized." "About that," Catherine smiled, pulling up a different video. This one showed Sarah at her workstation during the crisis, confidently directing the drone network and analyzing real-time data. Someone in the command center had captured the moment when she'd identified the optimal points for the controlled breach. This one's gone viral in the STEM education community. MIT's engineering department called this morning. Marcus felt pride and concern battle in his chest. Sarah was still in high school, though her work with global innovation had advanced her practical skills far beyond her years. "She's too young for all this attention," he worried. "Says the man who's being called a hero on 3 continents, Catherine countered gently. "But I understand. That's why I've arranged something special." She handed him an invitation. The Global Innovation Youth Engineering Summit would focus on emerging talents in humanitarian technology, with Sarah as the keynote speaker. "Let her tell her own story, Marcus. Show other young people what's possible." Before he could respond, Sarah burst into the office, her school backpack still slung over one shoulder. "Dad, you're not going to believe what happened in physics today." She stopped short, noticing their expressions. "What's wrong? Is it about the videos?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. "Actually, honey, we were just discussing your future. How would you feel about sharing your experiences with other young engineers?" Sarah's eyes lit up as she read the invitation. "The summit? Wait, keynote speaker? Me?" She looked between them, excitement warring with sudden nervousness. "But what would I say?" "The truth," Catherine suggested, "about how a 15-year-old helped develop a protocol that's going to save lives around the world. About working with your father to turn theory into practice." Marcus watched his daughter process this, seeing in her face the same determination he'd first noticed when she was small, taking apart her toys to understand how they worked. "You don't have to decide right now," he assured her. "Yes, I do," Sarah said firmly. "People need to know that age doesn't matter when it comes to making a difference. Mom always said that." She turned to Catherine. "Will there be other kids there? Other families working together like Dad and me?" "That's exactly the point," Catherine smiled, "to show that innovation can be a family affair. Speaking of which," she pulled up another screen, this one showing messages from around the world. Parents and children inspired by their story, asking how they too could get involved in humanitarian engineering. Marcus read some of the messages, feeling the weight of unexpected influence. One in particular caught his eye, a note from a maintenance worker in Brazil whose daughter dreamed of being an engineer. "We're not just building infrastructure anymore, are we?" he mused. "No," Catherine agreed. "We're building hope. Speaking of which, there's something else you should see." She pulled up a final video, this one from Wilson Manufacturing. Marcus's former co-workers had created a tribute, sharing stories of how his mentorship had influenced their lives. Even Howard Mills, the manager who'd fired him, appeared briefly, admitting they'd lost their best problem solver. "Your old life prepared you for this one," Catherine observed. "Every machine you fixed, every person you taught, it was all leading here." Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Dad, remember what Mum used to say about ripples? In a pond, how one small action could spread out and affect everything." Marcus nodded, thinking of a rainy night and a split-second decision to help a stranger. "She'd be amazed to see how far our ripples have spread." "Actually," Catherine said, "I think she'd say it was exactly what she expected." She handed Sarah another tablet, this one showing the summit schedule. "Now, let's talk about how we're going to turn these ripples into waves." As they began planning, Marcus's phone buzzed with yet another notification. Another video going viral, another story being shared, but this time he didn't feel overwhelmed. Instead, he felt grateful for second chances, for daughter's brilliance, for the twist of fate that had brought them here. "You know what this means," Sarah said, looking up from the summit plans with a grin that reminded him so much of Margaret. "We're going to need a better drone network." The leaked document appeared on Marcus's screen during the final preparations for the Youth Engineering Summit. At first, he thought it was a mistake, procurement records showing his signature on materials that had never been delivered, authorizations for payments to shell companies, dates that coincided perfectly with their successful projects in Indonesia and the Philippines. "It's already reaching the major news outlets," David, Catherine's assistant, said quietly. "They're calling it the Global Innovation Scandal." Marcus stared at his apparent signature, perfect down to the slight angle he always used. "This is impossible. I never signed these." But the documentation was flawless, a digital paper trail suggesting he'd been siphoning funds from humanitarian projects since his first day. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to craft this deception, using his increased public profile to maximize the damage. His phone buzzed. "Sarah, Dad, my friends are sending me weird messages about news articles. What's going on?" Before he could respond, Catherine burst into his office, her usual composure notably strained. "Emergency board meeting in 10 minutes. Marcus," she hesitated, something he'd never seen her do before. "They're calling for your immediate suspension." The board meeting was a study in controlled chaos. Faces on the video wall ranged from concerned to openly hostile. The chairman's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Peterson, these documents suggest a systematic misappropriation of funds under your supervision." "It's fabricated," Marcus stated firmly. "Every project I've overseen is fully documented. Real documentation, not these forgeries." "The signatures match perfectly," one board member countered. "And the timing, right after your public recognition, when our stock price was at its highest." "Think about what you're suggesting," Catherine interrupted. "The man who risked his life to save hundreds of people, who's transformed our humanitarian operations, who's inspired a global youth engineering movement. You think he's been secretly stealing from the communities he's helped?" But Marcus could see the doubt in some faces. In the corporate world, trust was as fragile as the prayers flags that still hung in his office. His tablet chimed. Sarah had sent him something. "Dad, check the metadata on those documents. Something's wrong with the digital signatures." Marcus felt a surge of pride through his worry. His daughter wasn't just bright. She had the same instinct for finding hidden problems that had served him so well with machines. "The signatures are perfect," he said slowly, an old lesson from his maintenance days surfacing. Too perfect. When I sign documents in the field, my signature varies slightly because of conditions, vehicle vibration, weather, terrain. These are identical, down to the pixel. He pulled up his own records, displaying them alongside the leaked documents. Look at the real signatures from our Indonesia project. See the slight variation? That's because I signed those while sitting in a helicopter during turbulence. Catherine leaned forward, understanding dawning. Someone copied a single signature and replicated it perfectly across multiple documents, but they didn't know about the environmental factors. There's more. Sarah's voice came through suddenly. She'd been remotely accessing the system with her security clearance. The metadata shows all these documents were created within hours of each other, not over months like they're dated. The board members murmured, the tide of suspicion beginning to turn. But Marcus wasn't finished. Years of troubleshooting had taught him to follow problems to their source. The real question isn't how these were faked, he said, but why now? What's happening that someone wants to discredit us? Catherine was already pulling up project schedules. The UN summit next week. We're supposed to present our new Global Infrastructure Initiative, a program that would make humanitarian technology accessible to developing nations without creating dependency on any single corporation, making certain other companies very unhappy, Marcus concluded. He thought of Nexus development, of their failed attempts to undermine the Malaysian project. Check the document properties. I guarantee these files were created on a computer belonging to one of our competitors. The next hour was a blur of digital forensics, with Sarah leading much of the investigation. Her drone network experience had made her an expert at pattern recognition, and she found irregularities that even their security team had missed. By the time Marcus's name was cleared, the real story was already breaking. A coordinated attempt by corporate rivals to derail Global Innovation's humanitarian initiatives. But the damage had been done. Trust, like machinery, required constant maintenance. We need to get ahead of this, Catherine said as they left the boardroom. Show people not just that you're innocent, but why these accusations were absurd in the first place. Marcus nodded, an idea forming. The Youth Summit. Instead of cancelling it, we make it bigger. Show the world exactly what we do and why we do it. His phone buzzed again. Sarah had sent him the final piece of evidence she'd uncovered. In that moment, Marcus realized that the greatest defense against betrayal wasn't just proving your innocence. It was having a family who never stopped believing in you. The security footage filled the command center's main screen, thousands of hours from project sites across 3 continents. Sarah had written an algorithm to analyze Marcus's movements during every documented transaction, comparing them with the timestamps on the forged documents. The evidence was building pixel by pixel. There, Sarah pointed to a particular frame. According to the fake records, you were authorizing payments in Manila at exactly this moment. But this footage shows you helping install solar panels in Nepal. Marcus watched his past self working alongside the village technicians, remembering the prayer flags snapping in the wind. The temporal impossibility was just the beginning. Sarah's analysis had revealed dozens of such contradictions. The deeper we dig, the more obvious the fabrication becomes, Catherine said, studying the timeline Sarah had constructed. But something's still bothering me about the timing of this attack. Marcus nodded, his years of diagnostic experience, picking up a familiar pattern. It's like when a machine fails. There's often a cascade effect. One problem reveals another. He pulled up the schedule for the upcoming UN summit. We need to look beyond Nexus development. Who else benefits if our presentation fails? Sarah was already typing, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards. The command center had become her second home during the investigation. Her youth, engineering summit preparation, temporarily set aside for this more urgent mission. Got something, she announced. The shell companies listed in the fake documents, they all trace back to a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. But here's the interesting part. They changed their digital security protocols too. Days before the documents leaked. Catherine leaned forward. They were preparing for scrutiny. Who has access to their security certificates? Working on it, Sarah muttered, lines of code reflecting in her glasses. The certificates were issued by... Wait, she sat back, surprised. It's not Nexus. It's Verde Sustainable. Marcus and Catherine exchanged glances. Verde was a smaller player in humanitarian technology, but they'd recently announced a major partnership with several governments. Pull up their project proposals, Marcus requested, his mind already connecting dots. Compare them with the sites mentioned in the forged documents. The pattern emerged clearly. Every project Verde had bid on corresponded to a site where Marcus had supposedly authorized fraudulent payments. They weren't just trying to discredit him, they were creating a narrative that would let them step in as the ethical alternative to global innovation. Classic misdirection, Catherine mused. Use Nexus's previous attempts against us as cover for their own manipulation. Sarah pulled up another screen, this one showing Verde's internal communications, legally obtained through their own security breach. They didn't count on one thing, she said with a hint of pride. Their security cameras use the same drone network protocols I helped design, and I built in a few features they never knew about. The footage she'd accessed showed Verde's executives planning the whole operation, including their attempts to frame Nexus for the forgeries. But it was a single frame that caught Marcus's attention, a familiar face in the background of one meeting. "Freeze that," he commanded. "Enhance the reflection in the window." The image cleared to reveal Howard Mills, his former supervisor from Wilson Manufacturing, now apparently working as a consultant for Verde. The man who had fired him was now part of the conspiracy to destroy his new career. That's why the signatures were so perfect, Marcus realized. He had access to all my old documentation from Wilson. They used those to create the forgeries. Catherine was already on her phone, mobilizing Global Innovation's legal team, but Marcus held up his hand, an idea forming. "Wait," he said. "We do this differently. Sarah, remember what you told me about the youth summit? About showing people. That age doesn't matter when it comes to making a difference." His daughter nodded, beginning to smile as she caught his drift. "We let them make their move at the UN summit," Marcus continued, "but instead of just defending ourselves, we demonstrate exactly why global innovation is different. We show them what real humanitarian technology looks like, through the eyes of the next generation." Catherine's expression shifted from concern to understanding. The Youth Summit presenters, each one with a story about how technology and compassion can change lives. "And we broadcast it all," Sarah added excitedly. "Live, unfiltered, using my drone network to show every project site in real time. No corporate speeches, no defenses, just the truth about what we do and why we do it." Marcus looked at the security footage still frozen on screen. Howard Mills, plotting in the background, unaware that his own actions would ultimately reinforce everything global innovation stood for. "You know what your mother used to say about karma?" he asked Sarah. "Sometimes it needs a little help from science." Their laughter was interrupted by an alert. Verde had just announced an emergency press conference for the following day. They were making their move earlier than expected. "Perfect," Catherine said, surprising them both. "That gives us exactly 24 hours to show the world what real innovation looks like." She turned to Sarah. "Ready to move up your summit debut?" Sarah glanced at her father, seeing in his proud smile all the confirmation she needed. "They tried to use technology to tear us down," she said, turning back to her keyboards. "Let's use it to build something even better." Marcus watched his daughter work, remembering the young girl who used to take apart machines to understand them. Now she was taking apart a conspiracy with the same methodical precision, proving that the next generation wasn't just inheriting their world, they were already making it better. The press release was ready, but this time it wasn't coming from Global Innovation's corporate communications team. Sarah sat at her workstation, surrounded by dozens of young engineers from around the world who had arrived early for the summit. Each one had a story about how Marcus's work had inspired them, and now they were about to tell those stories to the world. Verde's press conference starts in 5 minutes, Catherine announced, watching the media feeds. They're broadcasting from their headquarters. Marcus nodded, remembering another corporate boardroom, another moment when his career had seemed to hang in the balance. But this time was different. This time he had more than just his own integrity to defend. "Sarah," he called softly, "are you ready?" His daughter looked up from her final checks of the drone network. In the past 24 hours, she'd coordinated with young engineers at every global innovation project site, preparing for this moment. "All stations reporting in," she confirmed. "We're go for Operation Truth." The main screen filled with Verde's press conference. Their CEO, Michael Harrison, stood at a podium, his practiced concern almost convincing. "Recent evidence has come to light suggesting systematic fraud in global innovations humanitarian projects." Before he could continue, every screen in their broadcast room flickered. Sarah's network had taken control of their feed, and suddenly the world was seeing something very different. Split screens showed dozens of global innovation project sites, schools in Nepal, solar arrays in the Philippines, water treatment plants in Indonesia. At each location, young engineers stood ready to tell their stories. But it was the central feed that caught everyone's attention. Sarah, standing in the command center, her poise remarkable for her 15 years. "My name is Sarah Peterson," she began, her voice clear and strong. "My father is Marcus Peterson, the man you're trying to discredit. But before you listen to corporate accusations, I'd like you to meet some people." The screen shifted to show a young girl in Nepal, standing in front of a school powered by Global Innovations solar technology. "2 years ago, I couldn't study. After sunset," she said in clear English. "Now I'm learning computer programming, and Mr. Peterson taught my father how to maintain our power systems." Another screen, a teenage boy in the Philippines, working with one of Sarah's drones. "When the storm came, their technology saved our village. Now I'm helping design early warning systems for other communities." Screen after screen, young voices testified to the real impact of global innovations work. Sarah's drone network provided live unedited footage of every project site mentioned in Verde's forged documents, showing the truth of what had been built and maintained. But Sarah wasn't finished. "And now," she said, "I'd like to show you something about truth and technology." With a few keystrokes, she displayed the security footage from Verde's offices, showing the conspiracy unfolding in their own boardroom. The footage was damning, but it was Howard Mills's face that caught the media's attention. The man who had fired Marcus for helping Catherine was now exposed as part of the plot to destroy him. "Mr. Mills," Sarah addressed the camera directly, "you fired my father for choosing compassion over quotas. Today, we're choosing truth over deception. And we're doing it the way Dad taught me, by fixing things, not breaking them." Catherine stepped forward then, her authority adding weight to the moment. "Global innovation exists to solve problems, not create them. So instead of holding a press conference to defend ourselves, we're launching something else today." The screens shifted again, showing young engineers from around the world. "Welcome to the Global Youth Engineering Initiative," Sarah announced, "a program that will provide training, resources, and opportunities to young innovators everywhere. Because the future of humanitarian technology shouldn't be about corporate competition. It should be about human cooperation." The media feeds exploded with reactions. Verde's press conference had dissolved into chaos, their carefully planned attack overwhelmed by the genuine voices of those they'd claimed to want to help. Marcus watched it all from the back of the command center, his heart full of pride. The prayer flag from Nepal hung above Sarah's workstation, its colors bright under the screens, showing truth triumphant over deception. His phone buzzed. A message from one of the board members. "We never doubted you, Marcus, but we never expected. Your daughter hasn't just cleared your name, she's shown us the future." Catherine joined him, watching Sarah coordinate with her global network of young engineers. "You know what this means?" she asked softly. "The Youth Summit isn't just an event anymore, it's a movement." Marcus nodded, thinking of assembly lines and maintenance reports, of helicopter rescues and solar installations, of all the paths that had led to this moment. "Sometimes," he said, "the best way to fix something is to let the next generation show you how." Above them, Sarah's voice continued to guide the world through a new vision of humanitarian technology, one where age didn't matter, where compassion met innovation, and where truth was more powerful than any corporate agenda. The project map spanned an entire wall of Marcus's office, its digital pins marking global innovation sites pulsing with activity. Each point represented not just a humanitarian project, but a hub for the new youth engineering initiative. In the 6 months since Verde's failed attack, their work had evolved into something even Catherine hadn't imagined. "MIT's offering Sarah early admission," Catherine announced, entering with her usual quiet grace. "Full scholarship plus research funding for her drone network innovations. They want her to lead a student team developing humanitarian technology applications." Marcus smiled, remembering Sarah's face when she'd opened the acceptance letter. "She wants to defer for a year," he said. "Feels there's more to learn in the field first." Catherine nodded, unsurprised. Like father, like daughter. "Speaking of which," she gestured to the project map. "The UN's approved our expanded initiative. We're getting requests from 40 new countries for youth engineering programs." The map shifted, highlighting potential new sites in Africa, South America, and Asia. Each location represented communities eager to combine traditional knowledge with next-generation innovation. But it was the small notation beside each pin that made Marcus proud. "Local youth lead," followed by a name and age. "Remember when you worried about Sarah getting too much attention?" Catherine asked, zooming in on their Thailand site, where a 16-year-old girl was leading the development of an AI-powered crop management system. "Now, look at what she's inspired." Marcus touched a point on the map, their original project. In Nepal, the prayer flag still hung in his office, but now it was joined by dozens of similar tokens from around the world, each representing a community transformed by the combination of technology and compassion. "It's not just about building things anymore," he mused. "We're building people, leaders." His tablet chimed with an incoming video call from Sarah. She was in the Philippines, working with local youth to expand the drone early warning system she'd helped create during the dam crisis. "Dad!" Her excited face filled the screen. "You have to see this. Remember Ramon's daughter Maria? She's modified the drone software to track fishing boat patterns. They're using it to protect coral reefs and optimize sustainable fishing zones." The camera panned to show a young girl confidently directing a swarm of drones from a simple control station. Marcus recognized the same focus he'd seen in Sarah when she first started taking apart machines. "That's not all," Sarah continued, her enthusiasm infectious. "We're linking similar projects in coastal communities across Southeast Asia. The kids are calling it the Ocean Guardian Network. They're sharing data, solutions, local knowledge." Catherine leaned into frame. "Sounds like you're creating something bigger than we imagined." "That's just it," Sarah replied. "We're not creating it, we're just giving them tools and stepping back. They know their communities, their challenges. They just needed someone to believe in their solutions." Marcus thought about his journey from factory maintenance to global humanitarian work. Sometimes the best leadership is knowing when to let others lead. The project map updated in real time as Sarah's young team logged their innovations. Similar updates flowed in from around the world. Students in Kenya developing solar-powered water purification systems. Teenagers in Brazil creating automated reforestation drones. Young engineers in India revolutionizing urban farming techniques. The board's calling it the Peterson effect, Catherine said after Sarah signed off. The exponential growth of youth-led humanitarian innovation. But it's more than that, isn't it? Marcus nodded, watching the map pulse with activity. It's hope, multiplied by opportunity, powered by the fearlessness of youth. He paused, thinking of Margaret. Sarah's mother used to say that education without purpose is like an engine without direction. We're giving them both. His phone buzzed with a message from the Nepal site. They were ready to launch their expanded education program, with local students teaching traditional building techniques alongside modern engineering principles. The message included a photo of prayer flags flying above solar panels, old wisdom embracing new technology. You know what's remarkable? Catherine said, studying the project updates. None of this would have happened if you hadn't stopped to help a stranger in the rain. That night, Marcus thought about choices and consequences, about assembly lines and helicopters, about daughters who grew up to change the world. Maybe, he replied, or maybe it just would have happened differently. The world was ready for this. It just needed a spark. Speaking of sparks, Catherine smiled, pulling up another screen. Wait until you see what Sarah's team is planning for the next youth summit. They're calling it Operation Global Transformation. As they reviewed the ambitious plans, Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride and wonder. His daughter wasn't just following in his footsteps, she was creating new paths for others to follow. And somewhere, in every project site around the world, another young mind was lighting up with the realization that they, too, could make a difference. The project map continued to pulse with updates, each point of light representing not just a location, but a story of transformation. Marcus touched the Nepal marker, remembering where it all began, and smiled at the thought of where it might lead. The ring caught the evening light as Catherine turned it in her fingers, its simple elegance matching the woman who had chosen it. 1 year to the day since the accident that had changed everything, and they stood in the same parking lot where it had happened, though everything else was different now. I had it all planned out, she said softly, looking at the repaired concrete barrier that still bore faint scars from that rainy night. Board meetings, quarterly reports, the endless cycle of corporate life. Then someone chose to stay in the rain with a stranger and showed me a different way to change the world. Marcus took her hand, the ring warm between their palms. Behind them, Sarah was directing the setup for tomorrow's ceremony, the official launch of the Global Youth Engineering Academy, which would occupy the renovated Wilson Manufacturing Building. The factory that had once fired Marcus for showing compassion would now teach thousands of young people to combine technical skills with humanitarian purpose. Life has a way of coming full circle, Marcus said, watching his daughter coordinate with teams of young engineers from around the world. Sarah had finally accepted MIT's offer, but only after ensuring that her drone network would continue expanding under the guidance of the next generation of leaders she'd helped train. The sound of helicopter rotors drew their attention skyward. A formation of aircraft approached, but these weren't the corporate black helicopters from a year ago. Each one bore the logos of different youth engineering teams from across the globe, coming together for tomorrow's celebration. Did you ever imagine this? Catherine asked, gesturing at the transformation around them. When you ran out here that night? Marcus shook his head, remembering the simple maintenance technician he'd been, the man who thought his world had ended when he lost his job. I just knew I couldn't walk away. Some choices make themselves. Sarah jogged over to them, her tablet displaying updates from project sites worldwide. Mom would love this, she said, looking around at the bustling activity, especially the odd part about turning your old factory into a school. Marcus touched the ring in Catherine's hand, thinking of Margaret, of choices and changes, of endings that became beginnings. She always said everything happens for a reason. I think she would have seen this coming before any of us. Speaking of seeing things coming, Catherine smiled, your daughter has an announcement. Sarah's eyes sparkled with familiar determination. I've been working with the teams in Nepal and Thailand. We're developing a new kind of educational program, combining traditional wisdom with advanced technology, teaching kids not just how to build things, but how to build them in harmony with their environment and culture. Marcus recognized the passion in her voice. It was the same tone Margaret had used when speaking about her dreams for their daughters. Future, the Peterson legacy? He asked, remembering the name the media had given their family's impact on humanitarian innovation. Actually, Sarah grinned, we're calling it the Full Circle Initiative, because every end is just a new beginning, right? Catherine slipped the ring onto her finger, its simple band representing not just their union, but the joining of different worlds. Corporate power and humanitarian purpose, technical expertise and compassionate action, past wisdom and future, innovation. Above them, the helicopters landed one by one, bringing young leaders from every corner of the globe. Tomorrow, they would officially open the Academy's doors, launching a new chapter in their ongoing story. But for now, in the quiet of the evening, 3 people stood where it all began, watching the sun set on one chapter of their lives and rise on another. Ready for what comes next? Catherine asked, squeezing Marcus's hand. He looked at his daughter, who had grown from a curious child into a leader of a global movement. He looked at Catherine, who had transformed from a corporate CEO into a pioneer of humanitarian innovation. And he looked within himself, seeing not the maintenance technician he had been, but the man he had become. You know what? He smiled, feeling Margaret's presence in the gentle evening breeze. I think we all are.